Hello, I'm the Pink Phantom, and this is my podcast. Join me as I delve into the world of games and gaming, and especially old school RPGs. Together, let's voyage into the astral realm and check out my Phantom thoughts. All right, so this episode is probably just going to be me talking a bit. I've got some of my AD&D campaign that I could do, but I hadn't really sorted it out in a way that I can communicate it well. And I haven't received, come on, mouth work, received any calls as of this moment, which is Monday afternoon. So, and if there are any, I'll tap them to the end and add my extra or save them for the next episode. So this is going to be probably a pretty short little episode. But, as someone in the RPG space, and in particularly, OSR old school related, there are, of course, a lot of games out there. There's free to play games, free to buy games, free to download games on like Drive-Thru RPG, or, pay what you want is usually what it is. And there are Kickstarters, and there's all these various things where people are touting different mechanics or books of tables or things like that. And I've been looking through some of these things I have. And one thing I noticed in some of the games that I've bought that I got, that when I bought them, and pretty much sure they're all through Kickstarter, because they have print options, and these are some of the print option books I have, is they have lots of mechanics, they have lots of tables and stuff, a lot of old school stuff, and some of them try to communicate, what they're trying to get across to you in terms of atmosphere of the style of game that this is meant to be used for, and some of them don't. But one thing that I think is missing in the four I'm looking at particularly here, and these are Crowns, Kill Monsters, Raid Dungeons, Get Rich and Try Not to Die, Realms of Peril, classic fantasy adventure game, Grok, Grok, question mark, exclamation point, and For Coin of Blood, second edition. And they all have a lot of pretty cool stuff in them, I think, that you can use, and they have some different types of mechanics and stuff to try to get your way. Some of them have little bits of fiction to give you the atmosphere. But what none of them have in the books are adventures. And I think if you're playing a game, even if it's, an old school game, they say you can use this with an old school game. It's going to be similar to your experience if you've played those style of games. But if you haven't, it's not. If you're coming at it new, if you've maybe you played an OSE game, or somebody has an old set of Beck Me boxes or BX books, and you played some of those, then you maybe have some idea of what you're going in for, but not necessarily really. And if it's something you say, well, this is cool, but what does it look like in play? And I know there's a no prep culture out there that just says, well, if it's got tables and stuff, you can just make it up as you go. But again, I'm talking about people who are new to the hobby, probably not first time. First time, they're probably not going to get into this. They're going to grab something, more name brand or something that their friends are playing that are introducing them to. But who are new to the hobby, looking for something a little different than the standard, maybe looking at running their own game for the first time, and something has said, well, this is going to give you the type to play this type of game. This is going to give you a chance to hear some interesting mechanics. Oh, that sounds cool. Or, and they see the basic mechanic and say a free sample or a free version and say, ooh, I want to buy that. And then they get into it and say, so what should an adventure look like? And some of these things have, well, I'm not sure if any of them have where you can build a specific encounter, but they can have tables that you roll on mostly, that you can roll on for building encounters. But, to put something together where things relate a little, because I think we can all agree that randomness is great, but when you can make it all work to seem like it's a whole, it's better. And so as I was looking through these things, I pulled another thing off my shelf that I backed through Kickstarter called the Old School Armory Character Creation Quick Start Equipment Guide. And that's what it was advertised as. It's kits, it's starting equipment, there's an inventory system in here, just something to help you outfit characters. You roll up your characters in your game, you give them some quick equipment, and then off you go. And it's 120, almost 130 pages of that. And then in the back of the book, there's an 80-page adventure. I mean, this is not a game system. This doesn't tell you how to create characters. It doesn't tell you how to manage a battle. It doesn't tell you how to do social encounters. It's equipment, but it has an 80-page adventure in the back of it. And even if you take into account the maps, there's about 10 or 11 pages of maps total, either full page or half page, and then there's another 6 or 7 pages worth of illustrations, some full page, some half page, some quarter page. But even taking that into account, there's 60 pages worth of an adventure in here. And that struck me as interesting because it's great to have a system that you enjoy, or a system that's very intuitive and gets out of the way of play. If you're looking for an immersion style, or if it's very crunchy, if you're looking for something where you can play the game, that player skill that we talk about in old school settings, having that player skill to be able to get through. But to know how to build an adventure, to know how to build an encounter, is just something different. And it's something that I think if you're offering a different system than, your bog standard D20 based system that's D&D or Pathfinder with serial numbers rolled off and a few things that are different that add a little twist or quirk to it, giving someone an adventure to go by. This is what an adventure looks like in this game. I think could be really great to newer people to the hobby, and particularly newer people to game mastering. And so that's just my little observation for the week, something I'm going to stick out here as a podcast. I think a lot of my podcasts have been getting pretty long with some of the stuff I've been putting in them, depending on the calls and how much the actual play runs. So something a little short is kind of a change of pace, a palate cleanser, if you will. But what do you think? What do you think about if you're offering a game system, should you offer, if not a starting adventure or just an adventure, something to look at, something to model, the style of play and the use of mechanics that you're trying to get through to someone reading your game, at least a template, a format for building adventure, or a philosophy of using the tables that you're providing, if you're providing a system with a lot of random tables, to create a coherent game so that people can bring a living world for those who don't have that experience yet. And that's all I've got. If no calls have come in, you're going to hear the outro next. Thank you to everybody who listens. Thank you to everybody who has called in. It's always a bonus when I get them to add those to the podcast, because I always like different viewpoints. It always sparks ideas, and in response to what I hear you guys say, you always have some good insight. Those of you who respond on a regular basis, and even those of you who have only responded once. I think I've gotten something from pretty much every interaction that I've had. So, but the podcast goes on. But what do you think? Hit me up. All the ways to contact me are in the show notes, and they'll be in the outro. So until next week, happy gaming, and have a great day. Well, hold up, everybody. Talk about speaking it into existence. I had no sooner said I hadn't had any calls as of this podcast, and one showed up and then another. So we do have calls from Jason and Mirke. So we're going to go to that and then to the outro.
Hey, Jason here. Just listened to episode 97. I'm way behind in podcast listening. I've been down for a week with the flu. I'm just finally getting back into things. But I really appreciate the kind words. Thank you very much. Of course, all you folks are really doing a great job of continuing the community that was started with Anchor, and I appreciate that. I'll still be calling in, and who knows, you might I wouldn't unsubscribe from my podcast feed yet. I'll just say that. As far as Daniel's call about box sets and starter sets, he's not wrong. I mean, when we look at value, what do we pay to go to take a family out or a group out to go bowling for the night, or, to go to the ball game or go to the movies, and then compare that cost to the starter set where you get to play for 2 or 3 nights maybe. And when you look at the amount of money, dollar value for the hours, then yeah, the starter set's a really good value compared to all this other stuff. Now, you have to offset that by the time it takes to read and learn the rules, but one could argue that if you enjoy it, then, that's not a lost time at all. So, yeah, maybe I was a little bit harsh on some of these starter sets. I think the key is approaching them more like buying an adventure module that happens to have an extra set of rules in it. So look at it that way, and maybe it's not so bad. Anyhow, keep up the great work. Talk to you soon.
Well, Jason, I'm glad to hear you're on the mend. I've been way behind in my podcasting too. My work schedule changed at the beginning of the year, and it's really thrown things in disarray. So I'm back and forth trying to keep up and catch up and all that good stuff. So I feel you on that front. Yeah, I wasn't planning on unsubscribing or anything, especially after your latest podcast, hinting that you might come back. And certainly it's good to have that feed there. I mean, if nothing else, from time to time, if you feel the desire to do so, or if just something catches your interest and you want to talk about it, it's there for you, and you can do like so many of us have, where it hasn't been, we're going to do it once a week, twice a week, twice a month, just when interest looms and sufficient things have accumulated to get on the air, so to speak, and talk about it. And yeah, the starter set is about the starter sets. They're a good value. I mean, if they're complete, I mean, that's the big thing, right? Whether you're talking about box sets or books or starter sets, are they complete? Can you play with them? Because the great thing about RPGs is if you have a system, something that's complete that you can play with, and especially if it comes with, a way to create adventures or adventure in the box to show you what it looks like, then you can take it from there in a lot of cases, especially if it's someone that's played with RPGs a lot, or if it's just someone with a good imagination that figures out the system and just plays around with it. That's what RPGs are. That's what they were. It was taking existing rule sets, and back in the day it was war games, and manipulating them and changing them to get the experience you want. And I keep bringing this up, and I guess it's because I spent months reading it over and over and podcasting about it, but this is, what the book Muster says is kind of the essence of a campaign, is having that idea of the adventure or the experience or space that you want to explore, and then finding the rules and the people that want to the people that want to explore the space with you, and the rules that let you do that. And if the rules aren't exactly right, then you tweak them. So that gives something like a starter set great value, because that's what it is. It's a place to start, and maybe the path you go on is the path the company kind of wants you to go on, is buying their fuller, for lack of a better term, product, or the more fleshed out product. But maybe it's the starting point for your own game. Maybe it's the starting point for your own campaign. Maybe it's the starting point for your own rule set. But as you pointed out in previous podcasts, the negative is if you have to have something else. And that's not new. It goes back toward the beginning of the hobby. You think about AD&D, the rules for how to generate characters are in the Dungeon Master's Guide. They're not in the player's handbook. And that's a little different because it was designed from the beginning, and I think the way it was presented was designed from the beginning that you were going to buy the Player's Handbook and the Monster Manual and the Dungeon Master's Guide, and that's kind of where what WotC has picked up is that pathway. You got the core triumvirate of books, and then you build from there. And so in a lot of ways, those 3 books are just a mega starter set with their adventures and their expansions on those books. Or you can follow your own path, or you can just play with what's in the books, because those 3 books provide a lot of gameplay. But I think your critique of starter sets and box sets and things like that is well pointed out, that sometimes it can turn into a cash grab, because companies have to make money. If they just sell you one thing one time, they're going to go out of business. But it's a good discussion. I'm glad other people have called in, and I'm glad you're a part of it, and thank you for calling once again, as always.
Hey Pink Phantom, this is Mirke the Meek, going for a walk, and we just wanted to call, say hi, because it's been a while. It's been so long that I'm just now saying congrats on finishing Muster. I really enjoyed those discussions. But I'm just listening to your most recent episode, and I appreciate your tribute to Jason, and I can agree 200% with everything you said. So yeah, thanks for that. He meant a lot. I called into his show to say the same thing. Basically, the whole reason I have a podcast is because he had his podcast. So if anyone's gotten any joy or anything useful out of my podcast, you got Jason to thank for that. I'm now listening to your response to Jason's call-in, and heard you mention that you used to listen to a lot of board game podcasts. And I'm curious if there's ones that you still listen to that they're your go-tos. As I do a lot of RPG podcasts, but I realized I'm not doing a lot of board game podcasts. And maybe that's a good thing, because I shouldn't be buying more board games, but I'm curious what your opinions are on some good board game podcasts to maybe consider listening to.
Rules. My take, I think, is you hope that the people that made the game play tested it. And I'm thinking more of like board games, card games, that type of thing. But it also could work for RPGs as well. You want things to be, especially in board games and card games, you want things to be balanced. And the rules are fun and engaging. And if you stray off of the rules, you are more likely to unbalance things and make it not so fun for at least one person or multiple people. So I think the rules could be used to help keep things balanced, or help keep things in the lane things were intended to be in, to keep the fun consistent. I suppose that might be a reason that you should be following the rules as well. But if, as you were suggesting, as Daniel has suggested, if you play by the rules first, learn them, understand them, and hopefully know how the rules interact with each other, then you can tweak them to optimize your fun, or your players' fun, etc. So I think that's another use for rules as well.
Also, rules can kind of be like a language that gets spoken, and you might have different dialects, meaning homebrew rules, but I think what's most important is your table is speaking the same language. It might be slightly different from another table's language, even though it's kind of the same root English. Maybe your one table is from the south and the other is East Coast use guys, but you're essentially speaking the same language, and it would be a little jarring to talk to each other or to mix tables, but there's still enough there that you can speak or play the same game, more or less. And lastly, with this long message, I'm just curious if you have a way to post your dungeon that you've been building with the Tales of the Dragon Slayers. You're describing all the rooms and everything, but it would be pretty interesting to to see it visually laid out. This isn't meant to be any pressure or anything like that. If it's too much, if you don't have it already in semi-digital form, then no biggie. But I just thought it would be interesting. Certainly curious. Anywho, keep up the good work. Thanks, and take care.
Hello, Mirke. Thanks for the call. You covered a lot of ground there, both figuratively and it sounded like literally. And it's interesting you bring up board games and card games talking about the rules, because they are, so much more dependent on the exact rules than RPGs, for a lot of the reasons you say, that they're play tested and balanced and meant to convey a very specific experience. I think in RPGs, that's the strongest advocation for staying to the rules, at least initially, and not just going off in your own way, is because you went into that rule set looking to have the experience that rule set says it will provide you. Now, this may be a little different if it's something that's promising to be more of a generic system, something alongside of GURPS, where they give you a basic system, a framework that you can then buy products that they sell to build upon, or build upon it yourself. But it seems like just the parts of the hobby I'm seeing have in a lot of ways shied away from that, where you're going for hard sci-fi, or you're going for the dungeoneering experience, or you're going for big battles and kingdoms clashing. You're going for superheroes. You're going for cosmic level superheroes. You're going for ground level superheroes, the neighborhood superheroes, the urban gritty kind. You're looking to fight against the cosmic horrors of the universe. Something a little more focused than just that general framework that you then place some specialized rules or specialized talents or specialized character combos on top of. In a lot of ways, if you judged board games and card games by sort of the RPG mentality, they would be considered total railroads. Because even though you have options of how to get to the end point, there's a definite end point you're going to get to. You're going to be the first person to acquire the 4 keys, or you're going to be the first person to negotiate a trade deal with the space aliens, or you're going to be the person that amasses the most points. And there's lots of different ways to amass points, and you can choose your own, but other players are going to be working against you in ways that maybe hold you back or even cannibalize you because they're trying to acquire those points the same way. But you play a board game or a card game to have that specific experience. You play poker because you want to play poker, not because you want to play Heart or Old Maid or Uno. So, board game podcasts. Several of the board game podcasts that I used to listen to kind of faded by the wayside. There was one that was called Not Just Another Gaming Podcast. And a lot of those podcasts also kind of branched between, they talked some role-playing games. They mainly talked board games, but they talked role-playing games. And I kind of zoomed in on a lot of war games, because that was more of my board game background back when I was younger. And so there are some podcasts that I picked up that were specifically about war games, or semi-so. There's one called 3 Moves Ahead it's about strategy games. So there's some war games, and there's games with, maybe a war game mindset or war game aspect to it. But they also include things like city builders and stuff. And they talk about a lot of different games, not just board games. They'll talk about computer games and things like that as well. But as far as the pure, hobby game, board game, Euro game, Ameritrash game specific podcasts, the first one that jumps to mind is the Dice Tower. And I haven't listened to the Dice Tower in a long time. I do subscribe to their video feed on YouTube, and they're just prolific. And it's particularly the the YouTube videos are a lot about reviews and playthroughs, and giving you a once over of of a game and its components and its rules and how it plays. It's an interesting story. The guy that founded it, Tom Vassell, he was a teacher, and this was just something because he played a lot of board games. He started doing it in his spare time, giving video reviews of board games. And he eventually acquired such a following that he was able to quit his day job and do that as his full-time job, which just is astounding to me, being a board game reviewer and you can make a living at it. And this was a guy that at that time, he still has kids, but they were much younger, some of them. So it wasn't like it was, they're all gone to college and I'm on my own, so I just have to support myself. He had a family to support when he got to that point. But that podcast is still out there. They're still putting out a podcast every 2 weeks. Another one is on board games, and it's still up and running as well. It's similar thing. They'll review games. They'll talk about their experience with games. They'll talk about cons they've gone to. They'll talk about games they're looking forward to. They'll give previews of games they've been given previews of. Sometimes they'll talk about, games themed episodes based on games with certain mechanics and such. And a lot of that is what actually attracted me to the board game podcast was when they would discuss the different mechanics, because these were things that weren't, well, if they existed, they weren't something I had either directly experienced or not experienced much back when I was playing more board games. As I said, I tended more toward the war game side, but there were some other games that my friends and I played at the time. And so it was interesting to hear these mechanics and kind of imagine in my head how that works. That gets the gears turning. I guess that's why I started listening and kept listening. And there's a podcast called Ludology, which is exactly about that. It's about how games work, how the pieces fit, how games can give a certain experience or give you a certain point of view. What makes a game fun? How do you fight? How do you give it complexity but not provide analysis paralysis? And another one that I've listened to, and I'm still subscribed to it, and every once in a while I'll pop in an episode. I'll read the synopsis of it and in the show notes and say, that sounds kind of interesting, is the One Player podcast. This is a podcast about solo games. So I do listen to that podcast from time to time. I do listen to Three Moves Ahead fairly often. Sometimes they have some longer episodes, and usually by about halfway through it, some of it I've heard about everything I need to hear. And then there's a couple of three wargaming podcasts that I'll listen to. One of them is War Games to Go. Another one is a podcast called Advance After Combat. But that's about as far as it goes these days. I'm not quite as into those podcasts, but there's a lot of them still out there, and they're still putting one out. The three of them I mentioned, Dice Tower, Ludology, and On Board Games. Dice Tower is every 2 weeks. On Board Games used to be weekly. I don't know if it still is or not. And Ludology is, I think it's about every 2 weeks. I'd see one pop up. So yeah, if you're looking for temptation to spend money, then I think you couldn't go wrong with any of those. As far as the map, yeah, that's something I've been wanting to do. It's on the agenda. I've got just kind of this pile of notes and map pieces that I'm trying to put together. I've got a big dot grid book that I've been at least compiling the maps together, because when I've been playing, I've been mapping in a little it's like a loose leaf notebook, but it's not a 3-ring binder. It's the binding is with discs. And the one I'm working with, it's from the ones I initially started buying from was a place called Levenger, and the paper and the products there, and they call it their junior size. And the pages they're essentially half a sheet of letter size paper folded in half. And so it's pretty compact, and it folds out well, and there's some grid paper in it that I map on, but you're not going to make a huge map on it. So I have these little map pieces, and I have to, this goes together and this goes together. But I am trying to put it all together and, organize the descriptions and everything and put them all together, because eventually I would like to do that, put it online. Even if it's just I get it in the book and takes pictures of it or scan it or something. I've also been trying to organize some session notes. I had intended to start a blog to put some of this stuff on, and then by the time I got to where I was working on the blog, I had a pile of stuff to deal with, and so it's one of those things where I'd work on it for a while, and then I'd get pulled away for something, or I'd lose interest, or I'd get inspired and go play again. I've also got some pictures I took of the maps I played on for some of the mass battles I've had within the campaign that I'd like to get out there at some point. So it's a in the works thing, but it's not a anytime real soon in the works thing. I know that once I put in the effort and get it where I want it to be and get it on there, then it'll be easier to keep up than to keep playing catch up. But I got to play catch up first. And I've also been looking online at just some map creation software or sites or something where I could put the maps together digitally and put them out there that way. But I really appreciate the interest, because that's that more impetus to get it out there. And I'm glad to hear you're interested, and thank you again for calling in. In the immortal words of Columbo, just one more thing. I will be putting a link to all the podcasts that I mentioned in my response to Mirke the Meek in the show notes. So if you're interested at all in any of those, take a look, take a listen. And thank you all for listening, and hope you'll come back. I swear this is the end this time. Really, 100%. The opening music of this podcast is Strength of the Titans, and the closing music is Late Night Radio, both by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. Thank you for listening to Phantom Thoughts. I would love to hear your feedback. You don't have to be part of the show. If you want to contact me and let me know, hey, these are for your eyes only. I just wanted to give you thoughts, ideas, response, and it's really for your eyes or ears only. That's absolutely fine. I'd love to hear from you either way. So just let me know when you contact me. I don't want to be part of the show. There are lots of different ways you can contact me. You can send me an email at phantomthoughtspodcast@gmail.com. And that can be a regular email, or you can attach an audio file to it. You can use the message button on my podcast site on podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/phantom thoughts. You can contact me via my Google Voice number, 864-209-1441. You can contact me via SpeakPipe at www.speakpipe.com/phantom thoughts. You can contact me on Discord, The Pink Phantom. All this contact information is listed in the show notes of every episode. And thank you for those who call in. Thank you for those who don't call in. I appreciate you listening and hope you'll listen again next time. Until then, I hope you have a great day.